I did, somebody just flashed by, but let's see if they did. No, that is yours. You tell me when, okay. We have Connie Hambley with us tonight, and she's gonna tell us about her book, Charity, and we're excited to have her. And we'll hear lots of information about places we think we know, people we sort of know, and wanna know more about. So here's Connie.
Great, thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
And I do want to thank everyone at the Georgetown Peabody Library for having me here tonight. I really appreciate this and coming out on a still cold and windy evening. I am the author of The Charity, and I can speak about this book the way a parent can speak about a child, or I can speak about the book the way someone would talk about being possessed by a spirit. This book had to be written. It was an idea that came to me as just a story about two people that had to come together but couldn't, and had to fight their way through it. So originally that was the concept, and the more I asked myself about who these people were, the more answers came and the more complicated their world was. The Charity tells a story about a young woman who uncovers the business and the money behind an IRA business cell, terrorist cell. The business and the money is World of Horses, in the World of Horses. It's Boston-based, so we have a lot of Boston Irishmen. If you know anything about the horse world, you know that it too is populated by some pretty colorful characters. So, the story itself begins in Hamilton, Massachusetts. Initially, we meet the main character of the story as a young girl, and we follow her through the layers of discovery of what has happened to her family and why it has happened. One thing that I always find very interesting, or the readers find very interesting, is that they ask me, why start the book where you did? Why not start it after she's, grown up and then has, revelations and backstories or backflashes? And I believe that getting to know the main character initially as a young girl helps the reader form an opinion about who this person is. You discover along with her the different, the different layers and the different revelations that she has about the businesses that surround her and about her family. One thing that registers with my readers a tremendous amount is who this person is. The favorite example I have is when a mom came up to me after she had read my book and said, "I loved your book, I thought it was fantastic, and I immediately gave it to my two daughters to read." And, how old are your daughters? And one was 14 and the other was 11 at the time. And I was glad that the mom vetted the book first, because it certainly isn't written for a young adult audience. But I asked her, why did you do that? Why was it about this character or what was it about the book that made you want to do that? And she said, because there was an essence in the character that you really got to know and love. You got to know her as a person. You understood what she yearned for and how things were stopping in her way. You meet her as a young girl. Something happens. She witnesses a murder, and she is accused of that murder. She's frightened, she's scared, she has no one around her to help her, and she goes into hiding. So she assumes different personas. But the essence of who she was never left her. The essence of being loyal to her family, the innate ability she had with horses, the yearning everything she had to put down roots and to be somewhere, all of those things never left her. And although she may have been able to change what she looked like or how she dressed, she could never change who she was. And that was one of the things that then brought her back into the attention of the charity. And if things went smoothly for my character, I wouldn't have a story. So obviously, as soon as she was recognized again, things really started to happen in her life. But this one mother said that it was all of those things that she could relate to and that she knew her daughter could relate to. And the fact that this very real, very human person was thrown into these situations and then had to rise up and overcome. And she did so in a realistic way. She didn't have magical superpowers. She wasn't superhuman. She didn't have any of the special gadgets. She just had to do it through who she was, which was honest and smart. You know, she had to outsmart the bad guy. She's clever. Certainly had a lot of fun writing scenes for her where she could maneuver around certain things. But it was important to this mom to say who she was, how she interacted, the character she had, not the character of who she was, but the character she had imbued not only the story with a life and a warmth to it, but then also gave this reader and many readers that additional propulsion to go through the story. When I'm writing a story, there are certain narrative arcs. So if you pick up any thriller, you have one arc there that says, character solves mystery, whatever that mystery is. So there's one narrative arc. But inside that arc, there are a lot of mini stories. There are mini discoveries. Some of those discoveries, I, as an author, really work hard on making you have to make sure you know that the pieces are falling into place. But there are other stories and other little narrative arcs and other discoveries that I really want you to have on your own. I do many book events, and I'm very, my favorite thing to do is to talk to a group of readers who have already read the book, and so I don't have to worry about giving spoilers, because I certainly don't want to give so much detail of the book away that it's like, oh, I don't have to read that, or I'm spoiling your experience as a reader to have these discoveries. But while I'm in these book groups, it's really fun to sit with them and have them say, oh, God, I can't believe what I discovered. I'm like, what did you discover? Go ahead, tell me. And they'll say, I can't believe that this happened, or I knew from the get-go that so-and-so wasn't a good person, or was he a good guy or a bad guy? And all of these little discoveries they felt were theirs. And it also, to me, helps know that, because I want my reader to have this book become a part of a fabric inside of them. To me, the greatest compliment of reading a book is I read that book and I thought about it so much after I put it down. That to me is the the height of compliment, where someone says, I really thought about that book, and when this happened and I reflected back on it, or I really learned a lot from reading your book. I had no idea about horses or about money laundering or about the legal system, and I really learned a lot from your book. And I love that, because I want you to come away from the experience of reading this book as really feeling like you've invested your time wisely. When my readers come back and talk to me and they share this experience, I'm very happy. My readers are men of different ages. My readers are women from, well, my youngest was 11, but that was with parental approval. But I would say from mid-20s on up for mostly women as my readers. And historical fiction is a genre that a lot of the men read and are would mostly gravitate toward. Women read women's fiction, some light, cozy mysteries. And I do have some thriller writers that say, I'm going to read this thriller. What I find very gratifying is that readers of all of those different genres find something in this book that really resonates with them. Readers of historical fiction like historical fiction because they come away learning about an era, learning about an event, learning about a person that they didn't know before. Readers of women's fiction love that exploration of the inner life of some of their characters. Both of those readers on the different end of the spectrum come away from reading my book as really getting something out of it. My own background is as tightly woven into the book itself as the different narrative arcs are. My background, I'm a former lawyer, but I hear once a lawyer, always a lawyer, so I've been told I'm a very nice person in spite of that fact, so I kind of hold on that one for a while. I am a banker and have had a tremendous amount of experience riding and training horses. Also in my background is a family history of arson. I grew up on a small farm in New York, and on St. Patrick's Day, 49 years ago, we looked out our backyard and saw this. And so this is actually my family's farm when it was on fire. And my father, just 5 minutes before, was in this building, letting the cows out. They had been locked in their stanchions ready to be milked. What happened that day is that someone worked for my family and decided, for whatever reason, that he took exception to us and decided to show up and light a match, and the rest ended up as that. There was a tremendous upheaval at that point in time, but I really give my parents a lot of credit for battening down the hatches and having everyone emerge in a very solid, we'll overcome all of this. Bad things happen to good people, but what happens to you is up to you. And to move forward from that. So there were a lot of lessons learned. And as I was writing this book and figuring out the inner character of my main character, I found myself really reflecting back on that a lot. I realized that there is a strength inside all of us that we might not necessarily know we have until we're faced with something like that. And it's an everyday kind of strength that you might relate to a friend, and your friend will, oh my gosh, I can't believe you went through that. I could never do that. That is the hardest thing. That's insurmountable. And you think to yourself, yeah, but I'm on the other side of that. I did that. And I think that the seeds for the charity and that aspect of my character were definitely sown at that point in time, because there is an everyday strength that's inside of you that you don't know it's there until you realize that, yes, you do have to put one foot in front of the other. It's also that aspect that's woven into Jessica, where she has to either hide in that corner, get into the fetal position, roll up and just literally die, or she's going to say, I am no longer going to run away from this, I am going to run to it and find out what really happened. And it is that change that, that is a very realistic, enlightening and empowering change that resonates with my readers. The book itself, when I say readers to readers of historical fiction, the book is very well researched. There are, my own background as a lawyer comes through because there's a grand jury indictment. How is this going to happen? What's it going to, how can two people be accused of the same crime? What's the timeline for that? You definitely come through the book understanding that aspect of it. But more importantly, as far as what the research does, if I just spit back to you what this is, that's really boring. Here's a grand jury, this is what they do, this is what they say. That's really boring. What makes it interesting is what characters would say to one another with that knowledge. So if you have two lawyers, sitting down speaking with one another, you're not going to have one cite chapter and verse. Well, with grand jury testimony, it's really not a trial. It's it's not a two-sided affair. It's only finding out if there's reasonable cause to indict someone for the crime. It's not, there's no defense involved. Lawyers aren't going to talk like that, and readers are going to go, "Oh my God, this is excruciatingly boring." So what I try to do is make sure that when two people are having a conversation, it's a real conversation. That you can imagine what these two characters would actually say to one another. And I respect my readers' intelligence. I know that they're going to understand what's being said without me having to bullet point it out in 5 pages of dialogue. And again, that's something that my readers very much resonate with. What also resonates with them is how much realism is in the book. I love it when people say, I know exactly the house you're talking about in Hamilton, I know exactly the policeman you're talking about. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't. I'm glad you think you do. But I definitely, it's a fictionalized book, but it is so real to people that they think that they do know who and what I'm talking about. One reader came up to me and said, I know who the charity is. I said, okay, let's hear it. And I said, it's the Clover Club in Boston. I said, the Clover Club. All right. And I'm always happy to appear much more plugged in and well-read than I am, so I didn't let on that I had no idea what the Clover Club was. And he said, well, this is, what's Whitey Bulger's brother's name? Billy Bulger. Okay, Billy Bulger, Irish politician, is involved with lots of Irish businessmen in South Boston. They all get together once a month or once every couple of months, and they are there to help other Irishmen and businesses in South Boston, get a toehold and work. And they're the blind partners, supporting players behind a lot of the businesses there. But they also maybe had their fingers in a couple of other things. I mean, this is South Boston. This is, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. A lot is going on in Belfast at this point in time. And there were rumors that many organizations in Boston were helping to run arms and money to Northern Ireland. So this one gentleman was completely convinced that I had the inside track into the Clover Club and that this is exactly what I was writing about. I didn't. But I did go back and Google that right away and found out that, yeah, there was this group that sure could have looked a lot like the charity, but didn't. But it isn't something that I based the book on or the charity on at all. What that told me was that my research, my characters, my setting, my motivations were all so real that I could create an organization that did exist in reality. You know, and I found out about it, as I said, after the fact. But that tells me that if you are a reader who likes to have something, you know, stick to your bones after you put the book down, that I've done something right when I hear things like that. So it's a nice, intimate crowd in here. So I've given a thumbnail sketch about the book. I can go into more detail about the book, or I can talk about the writing process and where I'm at.
I'd love to hear
Excuse me,
about
Connie.
that.
Can I
Sure.
stop you for just a minute?
Sure.
I'm running out of battery.
Okay.
Okay.
Good that that isn't on here.
I'd love to hear about your process, how you
Yes.
write.
You know, someone once asked me, do you get up first thing in the morning and write, or do you, you know, write at night, late at night, or do you, you know, go for a run, you know, first thing and write in the afternoon? And I said yes to all of the above. The writing process, my own careers, as I've said, have been in law, in banking, recruiting, and I have always gravitated back toward the written word. When I was recruiting and taking pharmaceutical candidates from the United States and bringing them to opportunities in China, I was asked to write for Bloomberg Business Week in Nature Biotechnology about the experience of recruiting cross-cultural and Western trained talent into a very different world. And I love the people that I met. I love the process of inhaling information and exhaling something that was cogent and to the point and interesting. And I absolutely fell in love with the whole process of crafting perceptions based on what was on the written page. And that's also a lawyerly thing to do, where you want to, you know, choose your words carefully. And she waltzed into the room, she walked into the room, she fell into the room, she floated into the room. All of those things conjure very different impressions. My writing process then is very similar to how I began, which is I inhale information and exhale. If it's a journalistic piece, exhale, you know, facts, and, you know, structure it to lead you through the knowledge so that your knowledge can build and you'll have a full picture at the end of the article. Writing a story is the same way, that I take the information and build it very consciously and slowly, sometimes hiding the information in a scene so that the reader feels that they've discovered something too, but always aware of what that information is as I'm building my case, in a sense.
Did you have this propensity before you became a lawyer, when you were a young girl?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
So
Yeah.
it's
was-
just enhanced that.
It's just, it's always has been there. Yeah, my, right. My dad has said that it's something that comes with being a natural born salesman. I could sell ice cubes to an Eskimo, he would say, so that he feels that crafting a story is very similar to selling a vision. And I have to say that business development, sales, and writing is very, very similar, in the sense that I want to know who my readers are, and I want to know their ingrained biases, because then I will use those biases to create the suspense. So, for example, my main character is an athletic young woman. So naturally, you're not going to think a lot of worldly things necessarily about this person, that she's, you know, crafty or cagey or anything like that. So I appreciate the biases that my readers will have. When I dress my characters, I'm very aware of their biases. If someone comes in, they've got the, the double-breasted suit and the shiny shoes and their gold, I mean, you just, you're all automatically set up, to think something's going to not be nice with this character. And I definitely want to use that. So my process is a lot of writing, a lot of trial and error, and a lot of crafting. So initially, I get the amorphous shape out there of this one character, just, the shadowy character. And then as I go through the revisions, the chisels come out a little bit, and then the face will come a little clearer, and their motivation a little bit clearer. And when I write a character, I might not necessarily want that motivation to be clear to you at first, so I have to be very aware of my language to make sure that it's going to remain, in suspense. As I said at the beginning of the show, that the conversation, the original concept of the book was, in a sense, two people meet and something was keeping them apart. It wasn't a love story. I don't want to characterize it that it was a love story, but initially there was a very strong relationship between these two people. When people finish the book, my top question is, are you Team Shay or Team Michael? Did Jessica end up with the right person? And I love it when they are not sure. That, I had them guessing all along, is this a good person or a bad person? Here's when Jessica has hidden under an assumed name. She befriends a very powerful woman. And at first you think, oh, great, Jessica has a benefactor, someone who's kind of taken her under her wing. But then as the story progresses, the chisels come out, and I shape that character a little bit differently, and want to make sure that, that's not really a good person here, or is it? I really don't want you to, I don't want to take away from your reading experience by having my characters be so cut and dry that that whenever so-and-so walks into a room, everything's going to be fine. That's no fun, at all. It's just not any fun. I had one reader who was a forensic psychiatrist on a popular case that made the Boston news, and she said that the relationship between Jessica and this powerful woman, Jessica at the time was hiding under an assumed name, but she was trying to put down roots. She was trying to reclaim her life, and was befriended by this one very powerful woman in this town. And normally, a powerful woman and a younger woman, there might be an intimidation factor there, that a lot of people might shirk away from that power and be kind of, whatever you want. But Jessica was slightly irreverent with that. She, she was just irreverent about the woman's power, not in a sassy way, but just in a very real human. She spoke to her as an equal. And what I thought was very interesting about this one perspective was that Jessica could not hide the upper middle class upbringing that she had. Here she was trying to hide, but she couldn't hide the essence of who she was, and it would come out in interactions, with a powerful woman. And I thought that was very interesting. It was a layer that I hadn't really appreciated that was there. But you asked me about the process of writing, and I'm going to read just about a page and a half of this. Yeah, just about a page, actually. And as you can see, it comes out really toward the end of the book. But we've already talked, and not too many spoilers have happened. You do know that it's about Boston and the IRA, so we have to be talking about Belfast and Northern Ireland. So I haven't given too much away. A few men remained in the Belfast pub long after the pints of ale were drafted and the hard red wooden bar top was wiped down. They were seated in the far corner, away from the faint light that shone on the stooped woman washing the floor. The dirty water slapped across the wide planked floor, chased by an ancient rag mop. The rhythmic swoosh, slop, slap, rush motion of the mop from bucket to floor lulled her into a false state of calm. The old woman paid no heed to the men. They, in turn, paid no heed to her. Tonight, as with all other nights, they took long pulls off their pints of ale and wiped a wayward drip with the back of a pale, bare arm. Shirt sleeves rolled up, they were deep into another session. The oldest man, with thick snow-white hair, clear blue eyes, and eyebrows that formed a straight line across his forehead when he spoke, was in the midst of his rationale. I told you, the ceasefire is on and it has held for over 1.5 years. I'll admit that the process is slow, but we have had some gains here. A younger man named Tim, barely in his 20s, burst in. Some gain, old Liam? What in the devil's name are you calling a gain? One man's picture taken with another? Our people do not care if members of our group gain recognition as statesmen. Having a leader's image snapped with the President of the United States is a laughable gain. What good does it do? Perhaps you think the barricades on Ulster Square have been removed because of the picture in the newspaper? Does it bring back our dead? The older man leaned across the table in anger. His powerful presence made the younger man shrink back. The old blue eyes flashed with hatred and anger. Who are you to talk about the dead or the price that has been paid for unification? I have lost 3 sons to our cause. My nephew, my namesake, died in a horrible explosion. My father and brother did all they could to help us from America, and now, instead of enjoying his final years, my brother is defending himself against all odds in the American courts. If I am ready to find another road to peace, then a small elfin lad like yourself should be open-minded too. He paused as others around the table bowed their heads in respect for the dead that were mentioned. Listen to yourself, Liam. You just said it yourself. Magnus is busy defending him, too busy defending himself to lead. You are trying to use that as an opportunity to take over. You are wrong, Tim. I am not seeking to be chairman. You are trying to take away our loyalties from Magnus. You are splitting us apart. No, I'm not. I'm showing you that there's another way to push our political agenda without killing people. You're not strong enough, and you are too old to lead us. That dialogue between 2 people in a Belfast pub, obviously you have a pacifist, and you have someone who's like, let's just get ready and start the bombing campaign again. Those 2 people would not sit down and rehash all of Northern Ireland's history, the people, the IRA factions, etc. They would sit down and have the conversation that they did. But as an author trying to impart information to my readers, that page probably took me 3 weeks to write. Initially, it started off being probably 10 pages long. But as I became more and more locked into who these characters were, I realized that they're not going to talk about, the Easter Uprising and the Orange Parades and the, Bobby Sands and all the other aspects to that. They were going to talk as they were, and I had to hone down their conversation to get the information to you, but also make sure that my book breathed with realism. And when they're talking about one man's picture taken with another, do you think having your picture taken with the President of the United States, that was Bill Clinton had made a trip to Northern Ireland right around 1995, 1996, the same period as the book, or actually earlier than that. And he could not, although he was very supportive of what Jerry Adams was doing in Sinn Féin and trying to get a political dialogue going, because at this point in time, Sinn Féin was not being allowed a seat at the bargaining table with the British. Bill Clinton was very supportive of there being dialogue and what Jerry Adams was doing. So the picture of one man's hand being shaken by another was actually Bill Clinton and Jerry Adams, the pictures that you might see of the two of them shaking hands on a street in Belfast. The way that happened, Bill Clinton's camp said, absolutely, we cannot organize a formal photo session between Jerry Adams and that. Because that's too much blessing that the United States would officially be giving Jerry Adams. We can't do that. So what the camps did, kind of behind the scenes, was that Bill Clinton then went down, he said, you know what, I want some ice cream. I just really want some ice cream. And so he kind of went off plan a little bit and walked around the corner. Well, Jerry Adams and his group was walking up the same street, and they happened to meet in front of, I think it was in front of an ice cream shop, and they shook hands. And all the cameras were there, and all the people were there and surrounded it. But it was a unofficial, official blessing of what the political process was behind the scenes. And it was really important at that point in time because the tensions were so high in Northern Ireland. There was a very tenuous ceasefire that then stopped just a few short months after that when they said, you know what, we need to bomb our way to the negotiating table. But it was, you know, the polite little political dance that people do that, that stopped any formal recognition to happen. But these informal forays started to build bridges and dialogues and, you know, get people to even sit in the same room. So that scene, as I said, took me weeks to write and volumes of material to read to hone it down into what do you need to know as a reader to make my book have bones to it and make it have a skeleton. And also to move the plot forward. You heard about someone rotting away in an American jail, and you heard, you know, my namesake. So you heard other aspects to the story that were important to propel the reader through, but it wasn't so bogged down in exposition that you're.
How did you get the dialogue?
Pardon?
How did you get the dialogue?
The Irish brogue, because I was reprimanded a lot in an Irish brogue when I was little. So the voice in my head is, I had Irish grandparents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had Irish grandparents who said, Jesus, Mary and Joseph Child, what are you into now? So that voice, that Irish voice was
Okay.
very much there.
All right.
I'm just reading right now a section from The Given Day. I'm in book club that's reading The Given Day, and I'm reading it for the second time, and we're at the part where Haynes' character, Danny, is infiltrating the Bolsheviks and the anarchists. And that dialogue, when two of them sit down, because the Bolsheviks had a slightly different perspective than the anarchists, but they were at the same place. Very reminiscent of what you read, because he does the same thing. He reveals the history behind the positions of the characters and gives you enough that you know where that dialogue would come from.
Right. And even the setting for that was the wiping down the tabletops in the bar in Belfast. That was actually the Duke of York bar where Jerry Adams was actually a barkeep and had wiped the tables down. But you know, all of these really fun facts, they have to go by the wayside. They, you know, because that's not important.
That would bog the reader down. You don't
Yeah,
need to know.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't want that. It wasn't really. It was a cool fact, but you know, now you know it. That's
Yeah, now I know.
but the dialogue, I find, to answer your question, the dialogue, I find myself literally sitting at my computer, really, literally typing with my eyes closed and listening. And I
Channeling your grandparents.
And where,
yeah, channeling my inner Irish.
where's the farm?
This was in Pauling, a town called Pauling, New York, which is east of Poughkeepsie, north of Brewster, right over the border from Danbury, Connecticut, north of New York City.
Okay. We had, you said Potsdam area.
Yeah, would have been.
We had three, about, I think three different authors come in from that area.
Oh.
And that would have blown my mind.
A convergence of some kind.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine.
You present your novel as being very character-driven, but I hear an awful lot of plot and a lot of background description in order to that.
It is a plot-driven novel, I have to say right up front. It is action-driven. If there are 20 pages without something really, going on, then I haven't done my job. But it is plot-driven. But I've read a lot of plot-driven books that just make my eyes roll. I thought, oh my God, because it
Flesh
doesn't.
out, give you a character.
Yeah, exactly. My style of writing is very much a John Grisham style, where he has I just read his Racketeer. He has a very easy, folksy manner, very smart way, and then he keeps on building up the tension. Very nicely done, very soft touch. And also Steg Larsson, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. I am in the process of writing the sequel now. I am envisioning a 3-book series, and the structure of the book is very similar to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, where you start off with a very defined initial introduction to the characters and to the world, very defined. But then, as the books continue, you realize that their world is a little bit bigger, and what happens in that world, and then it's a little bit bigger. So as I'm writing the sequel, I have my eye further on down the road for the 3rd book. There is, I just realized that even in this scene now, the ceasefire is in place, the bombings haven't started yet. In the sequel, the bombings have started. So I've taken you 3 or 4 months further in the future and have brought you into the Ardale bombing in Manchester, England, and I'm using that as one of the vertebrae in my story.
In Dragon Tattoo, she grows too and becomes more powerful. You're heading that way too, that this character becomes...
It's very interesting. This story, the character really evolved and really had a lot of growth to her, and I think that that's satisfying for readers to have. But also in the sequel, this story concluded. It wasn't a Scheherazade, the sun comes up and boy, that story ends. That's it, and you're left hanging. That doesn't happen at all. Jessica's story concludes. There is a final narrative arc. But as you realize in the final scene that the 2 people who are there have much more to their story than what the reader has. And I can tell you the story. I can tell you where they went and what they did and what's happening behind the scenes. And I realized that was my next book. And also there's a story about Jessica's mother. Who is she? And the sequel that I'm writing goes much more into that question and to answer the question of, who is this woman? How could she do what she did? And what were her motivations? And I found that was a tremendously compelling story. But it also, Jessica's who the reader identifies with. So it has been a very interesting. I'm literally writing 2 books in parallel. So I'm writing a bit of a prequel and then a sequel that meshes. So it's been a little interesting going through that. I spent a lot of time on my computer holding my head. A lot of time.
How many hours a day do you spend?
I spend at least 8 hours a day at my computer.
Wow.
And it's a lot of it's promoting. A lot of it is the social media that goes in behind it, and a lot of it is just making things happen. Very pleased. I will be on a TV show, Boston Literate, at the end of next month. They've heard about me. They've heard about my book, and they want to interview yet another interesting Boston author. So I'm very pleased to be placed in that category. Really
That's one of the things that many of the authors that have come to us have said, how how much of their time, Terry talks about it too, is absorbed in the business part of it.
Mhm.
And how much that takes away from the writing.
Yeah, it does take too much time away from the writing, but my professional business career was business development, marketing, and sales. So for me to
You're
pick
well
up the
placed.
phone, for me to pick up the phone and make something happen, that's fine. When people write a review and post a review, I am very apt to pick up the phone and talk to them. Find out who they are, or send them an email and just thank them and appreciate that. And,
Who'd you work for?
I worked for, well, you probably remember Shawmut Bank way back when, and Fidelity Investments
Okay.
way back when, and then I did pharmaceutical recruiting, and went to China. Did all really fun. It was really awesome.
Nice plane
Mhm. Yeah. Any other questions for me? Because I could literally, when it comes to this, I could.
Yeah.
So how many hours do you spend writing the book, not sitting with
I'm gonna give it 4. Some of it could be all just rereading what
Yeah.
I've written and doing some of that
That's what I meant.
chiseling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then new pages, new words. I find my writing goes in stages that just allow yourself to write pure crap.
Mhm.
Just get it out on the page. Just get all of that stuff, all of the flying unicorns or whatever other horrible thing you can think of. Get it out on there, not to disparage fantasy.
That's all right, you're right.
It wouldn't be in my book.
That's all right.
But it wouldn't be in my book. Let's just get it all out there and then craft. And what I have found, which I am amazed at, is that writers will be introduced to me. I'm sorry, not writers. Readers, characters will be introduced to me.
Yeah.
And they will have a voice, and they will have a persona, and they will have a point of view. And I am, it's like,
Where did that
okay,
come
you
from?
want to be out here, here we go. Let's
Yeah.
just see where you take us. And it is fascinating to me how then it's like, oh my God, that's how they fit back in. One character, I'm very sensitive about just regurgitating information. I need it to be crafted in an interesting way. And there was one character in the sequel that needed to impart information to the reader because it was important for the reader to know what was going on a little bit further on downstream, but I couldn't figure out a great way to get that information into the reader's head. And there's one character was just giving me a lot of difficulty. He was a little bit mysterious, and he's just kind of unreadable, and he had these weird things about him. And I said, oh my gosh, this guy has Asperger's. He's on the autism spectrum
Yeah.
disorder. And once that clicked in, it's like, it was amazing. And that's who he wanted to be ever since I started him, but I was resisting it because I didn't understand. And then once I clicked into that, I was like, let's do it. Let's make it work.
Thinking of Toni Morrison's Jazz, she's all throughout the novel, she gives the characters the most miserable time. Toward the end of the book, they take over the book from her and
Take it right out of her hands.
make it a much nicer life for themselves.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, that's interesting that after writing about a character for a long time, you came to the decision that other writers have started from, how do I write about an Asperger's syndrome person if it doesn't?
It could work
It might.
wonderfully. It
It
could
might.
work wonderfully. This character is still being molded and honed a little bit. So right now he's a little too heavy on some of the, but I want him to have it be recognizable to the reader, even though it might not be recognizable to the other characters in that scene.
That's
So
sweet.
yeah, so it was really interesting. I just, of course, thank you.
I'm sure
That's
it
awesome.
percolates through your mind during the day too, or at night, in the middle of the night.
Yeah, it's always there.
Yeah.
It's always there.
You're saying you sit down and write for 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever.
Well, Updike did.
Doesn't matter.
He got up every morning and wrote the
Well,
minutes.
so does Hang.
Yeah.
But I'm sure but he stopped. he stopped at noon, while Haynes stops an hour after he gets up, 2
Mhm.
hours there. And, but I'm sure it's with him the whole day and night.
Right, it's not that it's not permanent.
Yeah, well, they say
He
that
just
writers
stops the
never have,
process.
writers never have vacations
Right.
because they're either at their keyboard or they're thinking about what's
Mm.
going on, and it's really true.
You write late, don't you? You're writing
Late at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Nice and
can't.
quiet.
Because I that's one thing I have to say, that there are times when I'll sit back down at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night and start, but then I'm, it's hours later and I come up for air and, I can't, I can't do that.
Are you self-published or do you have a publisher? How did that work out?
I was telling Terry about this earlier, that there was a publisher. I am self-published. I'm an indie. It's under the Trialer Press label, which is my label. There was a publisher who said, I like your book, I'm going to do that. And for a writer, that's tremendously validating. Woohoo, someone
Yeah.
wants to publish me, that's fantastic. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about this. And because they were a small house, they could bring me so far down the runway. They would certainly, tremendous amount of advice, but as far as the business development aspect of it, and really getting it out there and expanding my readership, etc., I realized that certainly they would help get me out there to a certain point. But then after that, so I made a very conscious decision that rather than starting here, I will start back here. And I'll make some mistakes, and I have, but, then when I hit this point, it was a business decision that I decided that I was going to push it out there myself.
You have the background that you have in business.
And that was the other thing too. And I won't stand up here and say, boy, do I know everything there is about publishing, and I didn't need, somebody behind me, because I can see the value to it. As I said, I've had some fits and starts and trials and errors, but I truly believe in the book, and I believe that I'm the person who can make the book happen. I feel for my own self that, first off, it's hard, it's a learned skill for me to stand up in front of people and say, my book is really good, I can do this. I think
You've not said that. You've made us interested. You haven't said, this is really good, you gotta read it.
But I'm thinking it. But I think that it's, Sheryl Sandberg says, you lean in, don't lean back. It's hard for women to say, you know what, I did that, I'm good. It's hard for women to accept a compliment and just say thank you. They might say, oh, it was the team, oh, it was someone else. So it is a learned thing for me to stand up here and say, I am standing on a very firm foundation and I move forward. And I honestly, my reviews, my fans, I know that I have a book. I know I have it. I know that the sequel is going to be, hopefully, as strong, if not stronger, and the third book will be hopefully even stronger than that. And some writers run out of steam, and I can see where it's not quite run out of steam. So to answer your question, as a indie, I do it not because there weren't any other alternatives, but because I genuinely believe that after I push for a certain amount of time, that there will be a pull, and it will pull me along with it. And one of those things is that I've been invited onto radio shows, TV shows, local. So I'm feeling that now, that little bit of gravitational pull.
Get momentum.
Yeah, and it's not a lucky thing, you make your own luck, and I am out there, and I want to make it happen.
So the marketing, that must be the tough part of it.
It is.
Do you do it with blogs or things of that nature?
Yeah. I have a blog. I try to, when you first put a blog up, it's like every other day you're posting something. It's all so exciting. And then after that, it's like, okay, I'll get there this month sometime.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on Twitter, Facebook. I just get out there, and it's not so much the social media, because I am telling you, you can waste countless hours on that. I give myself 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night to do Twitter, which is just very disciplined. I know what I need to do, get that done, and then at night, friend any new followers and put a few more out there, and that's it. That's it. Because you can spin, oh, look at this article. It's awful. So if you don't have ADD, you will get it by the time you're done with Twitter, I'm telling you.
You
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah.
So
So the other,
coming out to play, well, hopefully the larger audiences,
Yeah.
that helps.
yeah, I do. Well, I've done a couple of these this month, so,
Mm.
I was just in Ipswich. I have another one tomorrow, so another one on Saturday, so I know that but I'm always happy to talk about it, because it's not necessarily, hopefully you'll go and you'll tell your friends, and, it's a good book, and hopefully you'll put a review up on Goodreads and Amazon and do that. Hopefully, I've engendered that kind of excitement, and knowing that as an indie, I need every reader is so important. But also just the marketing lead up to an event like this. It's in the newspapers, people talk about it, you've got a kiosk out front, all of that is just really, it helps expand that. I'm very, a lot of people know my book On the North Shore. I was walking down the street the other day and someone said, "You're that author."
Oh.
That was exciting. That was exciting. But it's all, just keeping your elbows out.
Yep.
Mm.
Absolutely. Will you come to book clubs? Will you come to book clubs?
Absolutely, I make house calls. Absolutely,
Right.
I do. In fact, my favorite thing is to be in a room of people who have read the book, let them have a glass of Chardonnay and kick back and talk, Team Shay or Team Michael, let's hear it, ladies.
Good.
So, yeah, it's fun.
I'll take your card.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, thank you, Connie.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate
I
it.
like being able to talk to you like this. I'm sorry that we didn't lure more people in the storm, but this has been wonderful.
I appreciate your time. I really do. This is, as I say, I feel strongly in the book, and I just, appreciate every opportunity I have to get out
Got
there
a
and
book
talk
for
about
sale, I hope.
it. I do. I do indeed. So.